Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce to you Wangu Kamundia, distinguished Toastmaster with a workshop entitled Who is the Boss in You? Over to you, DTM Wangu.
Shukran, Kaka John Zira, kwa kunikaribisha kwa ukumbi. Hamjambo mabibi na mabwana. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great honor and a pleasure to be here today. Of course, first, I have to pay tribute to my home club, Fasaha, by showing you that I have been learning something in Kiswahili. Today, my task is to lead us through finding out who is the boss in me. Anyone who is in this audience today, who is the boss in you? And to start us off, I'd like to tell you a story about my Toastmasters journey. In 2007, I was secretary at my home club at the time, Kwanza Kenya Toastmasters Club. And at that time, we had a president whose name was Edith Mahungo. Edith's vice president for education was Matu Mugo. And Matu, I've spoken about him before, but I have to speak to him today because I need to tell you about my journey of learning how to be a boss, to make my boss move. So Matu was a stickler for excellence. He did everything, dotted his I's, crossed his T's. If he had a report, he enumerated everything and delivered it in time. And as the secretary, I was struggling. I was young, I was busy. I was and still am highly sanguine. So I love to start projects and I am a poor finisher. So you can imagine detail orientation, which Edith also had, versus my sanguine and extroverted personality, which didn't augur well with the club. And as the secretary of the club, it was my job to make sure all the details, all the records were kept well, and it was a real struggle for me. But I finished the year and transitioned into the role that Matu Mugo was graduating from, Vice President for Education. By the time I was transitioning into this role, I had promised Matu, as his club secretary and a member of the club, that I would give him one club goal, which was to complete my competent communication project, which I didn't because over the year I'd not sign up for speeches. And when I did, I'd always not be well enough prepared to pass on the first goal. So I finished the year without giving him a goal, but still he mentored me and encouraged me to go for Vice President for Education. So you can imagine he'd already understood who I was. He already knew he was going to struggle with me, but he chose to accept the fact that I needed to grow and encourage me to be Vice President for Education. So you can imagine a very, very shaky start, which didn't get better because when Matu became president, he had coffee with me before that. And he said, you know, Wango, I would like you to develop a sense of urgency. This was his parting shot to me to encourage me to be a better VPE. And so when we began our VPE journey with him as president, he'd call me and I wouldn't pick his calls, because I knew that whatever he was asking for, chances were high that I hadn't done. And he was very frustrated, but he kept at it, kept pushing. And one day I figured out, you know, it's not going to get any better for me. So I'd better just learn how to pick his calls and say it is not done. So now, before I get into the rest of the workshop, I'd like for us to think, especially for those of us who are in Toastmasters clubs, if you can type in the chat for me, who is that member in your Toastmasters club who is like Matu Mugo for you? That person who dots all their I's, crosses all their T's. When you see that they're signed up for a speech, you look forward to listening to that speech because you know it will be well prepared. They will have sought out their mentors. They will have read through the entire project. Please tell us in the chat, who is that member for you? Rosemary Waweru from Current Toastmasters, very well known. June Keriri, an area director right now. Robert Karanja, past area director and the current editor of Sautia Toastmasters. Catherine Gavigia, Japheth Musao, Sarah Wanjiko, we see you. And the thing I see about these members, Wanjiro Morevi, is that they are members who are known beyond their home clubs. They're not only known in their home clubs, but they've been there in contests, they've volunteered, they are probably part of this TCON conference, either as role takers or members of the marketing committee that has made it possible for her to do this session today. All right, now I have another question for you. And this question, I don't want you to put the answer out there. Yeah, it's not a name and shame. So I want you to say, who is that Wango Ashira who you as a Toastmaster, a club officer or TMOD would not touch with a 10-foot pole? You know, if I ask Wango to take this role, she will blue tick me. And on the day of the meeting, she will say something has come up. And all of a sudden, your thing goes belly up because you know you have to look for a last-minute role taker. Write it down in your notebooks or on your phone or whatever you're using to take notes. Write who that member is that you would not touch with a 10-foot pole. Thank you for your responses. I'm loving them. And let's keep the conversation going. So when Matu was president and I was vice president for education, Toastmasters in Kenya, it was Toastmasters in Kenya at the time, and we had some clubs in Ethiopia. It was not a district. So there was no clear transition after you became president. But one of the things I remember Matu saying to me as he was leaving the position of vice president for education, he said to me, Wango, the road to hell is paved on the backs of vice presidents for education. And he was telling me that because he knew I was in for a lot of heartbreak. And anyone here who has been a vice president for education, you know, you've suffered more than the other EXCO members because you're the one who has to deliver a full meeting, even when people blue tick you, when people say something has come up, or they say, I'll confirm, and they never talk to you until the meeting is over and they ask, how did it go? And this was many years ago. But this year, I remember being in a conference, a division conference, and hearing a speech by a member who was a VPE at the time, Carol Mbide, and she said that Toastmasters and the role of the VPE is sure training ground and part of the curriculum of the Kenya Institute of Character Development. And she said the same things. You get blue ticked, you get people who say, I'll confirm, and they don't confirm, or you hear somebody say, something has come up. And I feel like the more things change, the more things stay the same. We are here in, you know, we've transitioned from physical meetings where people would say, I'm stuck in traffic, I don't know if I'll make it. And they never make it for the meeting, and you don't know if they were really stuck in traffic. You have transitioned to people who come to the meeting and they are supposed to be taking roles, but they have video off for the whole meeting because just except for everything around the speech that they're going to deliver, they're chopping onions, chopping tomatoes, checking homework, writing theses, and still they are not contributing to the quality of the meeting that you're looking to deliver. And I wonder, what is it? What is it about all of us who have signed up for Toastmasters because we want to grow as communicators, grow as leaders? And yet when the opportunity to lead ourselves, make boss moves presents itself, we don't show up. We don't show up, and we always have this excuse about why it cannot be done as it should be done. It breaks my heart. And I'll tell you, my vice president for education can tell you at my home club, a lot of times I will show up for the meeting, but sometimes I'll say I have to switch on my video only for speeches because around that meeting, I am doing many other things which I know I'm supposed to be doing, but also perhaps because I wasn't well prepared, I didn't make arrangements for. So it's not really that I cannot switch on my video for the entirety of the meeting, it's that I didn't plan well enough. And I'm making my club suffer, but also I am not giving of my best self, and I'm not growing. And I feel today that the speakers who have come before me, for example, Sylvia Mulinge, and even the videos about my Toastmaster story that have been shared are resonating with the message I want to share with you. That you cannot be, I think what I heard Sylvia say was, you cannot make a great leader if you're not first a great human being. And these are the things I find that as a volunteer leader, you find that you're struggling with the most. That people are able to show up at their jobs. They are able to come in on time. They are able to deliver their reports on time. They are able to volunteer to go and give a presentation at client X because they are going to be seen, they are going to get paid for it, and they are going to get a bonus. But here where there's no pay, there's just the benefit of volunteer leadership. There is this thing that makes it okay for us not to show up. How many of us agree with that? Tell me about it in the chat. How do you see that we are different in the way we present at our jobs and the way we present as volunteer leaders? Are there any disparities that you see that we can talk about here? Yeah, anything you see. When people are being paid, they show up, they volunteer. But when you ask somebody, could you lead the table topics contest? Could you be the contest chef for a table topics contest? How many times do you have to ask people so that they can get the job done? How many times do you have to appeal to their inner motivations? Tell them, you know, I think you can do it because of A and B and C and D, and still they won't show up. In jobs, we dread memos and look forward to promotions. I love that. I love that, Elizabeth. Personal development takes a back seat. Growing ourselves is hard. All VPs, job courier. Yeah, Kathy Coit, I see you. VPE is vigorously pushing everyone. Huge disparity, Purity Meveka, and I'm first in line as one who contributes to that disparity. So thank you very much for your responses. I see one more. People are not self-driven, from Caroline Siovuda from Speaking Woman. I guess it's, as your president told you, we need to develop a sense of urgency even when we are volunteers. Thank you very much for that, Evelyn. And I think the challenge for me, the thing I think about, and something that I tell my mentees all the time, take the time to volunteer as a volunteer leader, a leader in your Toastmasters club, a leader in your Rotary club, a leader in your family groups that are trying to meet, trying to do big things, trying to organize to see parents every month. Because in those spaces, you do not get recognition for the work that you're doing. It's very rare. Somebody will say thank you, but there's no gift, there's no monetary reward. And those people are the hardest to lead because they don't see any direct monetary or financial benefit from doing these things. So they are not going to show up the way they would show up at work. But what I've found with time is that when you grow your skill as a volunteer leader, you learn things that leading in a job will never teach you how to do. And I will be speaking about those very, very shortly. When I finished with my task as VPE, I proceeded to be president and took a break from Toastmasters leadership for a while. But a few years later, I remember having a conversation with Harry Karanja, who was my mentor at the time and still is a mentor and a good friend. And he said to me, please volunteer to be area director in my term as district director. And I said, no, Harry, I don't have time for it. I can help you with other things, but honestly, I don't have time to lead volunteers. And I wasn't saying it because I hate leading volunteers. I just knew the work. I knew that if I'm leading a team of excos, it means I'm leading people who are not leading themselves. And I knew it was going to be frustrating. I didn't want the tears. I didn't want to appeal to higher senses of motivation for people who should find those things for themselves. But anyway, I ended up as an area director, and let me say I grew, because the road to hell is still paved on the backs of district leaders. And since I had come into my AD term halfway, I didn't get the credit for it. So I said, okay, let me just do division director so that I can finish the task and get the credit, because the credit is deserved. When you lead volunteers, you must push for that credit because it's the only thing you will get that's a guarantee, and it will remind you that you're growing in the process. So I led as division director. And I remember Harry, telling me these things I had been telling people: volunteer as a leader, it's the best place to learn. So Harry encouraged me to apply for a position in TRIO. And I said, no way, I'm not going to apply for a position in TRIO, because it's still about leading volunteers, and it's blood, sweat, toil, and tears. And I tell you, I have not been in district leadership, but now that I am here, I am seeing all the things that are wrong with my district. My club is struggling. I am not on the exco, but I keep saying, I think you should do. I'm not happy with the club because we didn't start our meetings on time. We don't have enough speakers. We are not well prepared, but I am not leading. I am just there to point a finger. And I tell you, it's very satisfying to sit there and point the finger and not really think about what my leaders are struggling with. And I feel like sometimes in Toastmasters, we get caught in that rat race and that rat where we are just able to say, I don't come for club meetings because the club meetings are not well organized. The speakers are not well organized. The evaluators are not kind, but it's very hard to say, what can I do about it? Who's in there like me? Can you tell me in the chat if you've been taking a backseat from your Toastmasters meetings because the quality of your club meetings is poor? Is there anyone in the chat who's like me, who's pointing a finger? All right, you can write it in your notebook if you don't want to raise your hand or put it in the chat. But it's something that I think I'm very passionate about it, because I feel like when you're sitting on the outside, it's very, very easy to see all the things that are going wrong. And at this point, I'd just like to talk about things that I think, our district is struggling with in the present moment. And there are things that I think any organization would struggle with. Just that lethargy. We look at our dashboard. For those of us who like to look at the dashboard, we see that we are not where we were at this time last year. There's so many things that have changed in this 1 year. And it's very, very easy to say, if my exco had made sure that we had regular meetings all the time, or if my VPE had come up with a plan for how we are going to get our 5 goals, we would not be where we are today. We would be a distinguished club. We would be a distinguished area. We would be a distinguished division. We would be a distinguished district. But the truth is that these things are true. But even more true is the fact that as a member, you're not showing up as well as you can. You are not being the boss with the boss moves. Is there any VPE who can say hallelujah in the chat? Any VPE? Karen, be there if you're here. Mwanasha Mwamlole, I see you. Jerry Gavi, I know you've been a past VPE, and I'd like for us to be aware of those things. I see that the timer is bringing my time to a close, but I'd like to tell you why I think it's important for you to think about these boss moves. Think about being a better member and taking a role as a leader in your Toastmasters club, because there are 3 important lessons I think you can take from the process. And the first one is that you find a way to make a way. When you're a leader, you find a way to make a way. When things are not working, you innovate to make sure you deliver a successful meeting, successful club, successful area, or successful division. You identify talent. You're able to see the people who can show up for you, and those who can show up, you're able to observe without evaluation, as Sylvia said, but the people who need guidance, the ones who will not benefit from your guidance, and the ones who will just need a bit of time and a bit of consistency to grow. And finally, you learn to be the team member that you want others to be. And as I close, I want to go back to my question. Do you remember that member who you would not touch with a 10-foot pole? I want you to ask yourself, who am I being like that to? Who am I being like that to? This member who's not showing up, who looks at me and thinks about me as the member they would not touch with a 10-foot pole. And I'd like to leave you with some words from a poem, a quick one. It's called, "When I point a finger at my neighbor, there are 3 more pointing back at me. The little one says, you're not so hot. If you blame the other fellow, you're on the spot. The second one says, go easy, mate. You ain't cleaned the rubbish from your own gate. Oh, when I point a finger at my neighbor, it just ain't honesty, because I realize I must first get wise to the 3 that are pointing at me. The third one says, supposing you had to run the country, what would you do? Oh, would you point your finger at your neighbor? Oh, would you point your finger at your neighbor? Where would this nation be? Well, I wouldn't wait so I can get straight with the 3. Well, I couldn't wait. So I soon got straight with the 3 that are pointing at me. They seem to say, see here, my lad, maybe you're 3 times as bad. What am I going to do about the 1, 2, 3 that are pointing back at me? Back to you, John Zira.
Yes, yes, yes. That's a boss move. Toastmaster DTM Wangu Kamundia. Just the way you've reminded us in this workshop, I'd like to remind everyone, or for those who do not know, at home, Wangu teaches reading, writing, and arithmetic. Here, she's the VPE of VPEs. I don't know what to give her, but if you have a title to give her, please put it on the chat box. Excellent, excellent job, Toastmaster Wangu Kamundia.